back to the bad news, Danielle.
Great.
Um, and I don't think I didn't notice that you got to lead off with the good news, and you're like, Andy can handle the bad news. Let,
I
let,
think you
let him,
can. You're
let him.
tough.
Yeah, I know, but you're like, let him piss off the listeners with the bad news. I'm going to sit here and celebrate. It's how you do. I understand. So on Thursday, the Supreme Court ruled 6-3 that states can block Planned Parenthood from receiving Medicaid money. The reason this is a big deal is not just because of abortion, but because Planned Parenthood, despite the way the right tries to paint it, provides a lot of health services to women that don't include abortion. Things like cancer screenings, things like contraception. And so they were able to get Medicaid money for those health services. Legally, you cannot get Medicaid money for abortion services, which is a whole other topic, but they were at least able to receive Medicaid money for non-abortion services. And the state of South Carolina didn't want them to receive any of this Medicaid money at all and tried to block them. And they got sued over it. And it worked its way up to the Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court has now said, no, if states don't want Planned Parenthood getting any money from Medicaid for any reason, they can do it. And we are continuing to see the erosion of healthcare in this country, particularly healthcare for the less well off who would be more likely to use a place like Planned Parenthood to get contraceptive service, to get cancer screenings, to get all these things that, again, have absolutely nothing to do with abortion. But here again, here is the Supreme Court, the conservative majority, just continuing to strip away the rights and abilities of folks who aren't rich. It seemingly is never going to stop, Danielle.
I thought to myself, is this Supreme Court worse than, let's say, the Supreme Court that decided on Dred Scott, or the Supreme Court that decided on Plessy v. Ferguson, or I kept going through some of these like enormous decisions that have been made. And I honestly think that this Supreme Court will go down, if we have books and this country doesn't just fully implode, as probably the worst in history. And that's saying a fucking lot, given the two pieces of law that I just named. I think that this Supreme Court will be known for killing, potentially millions of people, having blood on their hands. It is a disgusting display, of lawlessness, right? Like removing the ability of Planned Parenthood to take care of women, right, who are poor, who need aid. And there are already limited amounts of Planned Parenthoods in
Yep.
in red states, right? As it is. We've talked about it on this show, the number of hospitals that have closed down in rural areas, right? Obstetrics units that can no longer take care of patients. So this blow by the Supreme Court, honestly, is nothing new. It's very on trend with what they've been doing. But my God, I do think that the Roberts Court will go down as the worst court in American history. And maybe that's what he's going for. So bravo.
Yeah, I mean, look, I would say that at this point, I believe that this current Supreme Court and this conservative majority would have ruled exactly how the Supreme Court ruled in Dred Scott, which was that Black people were not entitled to U.S. citizenship, and also would have ruled the same way in Plessy v. Ferguson, which was the infamous ruling that separate but equal was okay.
Mm-hmm.
And basically said that, the Jim Crow laws were fine and dandy. I don't see 5 votes the other way on either of those cases in this current court. So I'm with you. I mean, it's definitely, it's going to be probably top 3 and may end up number 1, as you said, in terms of the worst courts. And look, back to the Planned Parenthood thing, this is going to result in Planned Parenthood offices closing.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what they want.
Mm-hmm.
That's what the people who brought these suits want. I'm not even saying that they're against cancer screenings for women. They just don't give a shit enough about those when their goal is to shut down Planned Parenthood because Planned Parenthood provides abortion services. So they don't care about any of the collateral damage that would come along with shutting down these clinics, these offices, because they are so warped that literally all they can think of is we want to make it as hard as possible, if not impossible, for a woman to choose to have an abortion. So if that means that women get cancer because they couldn't afford an early screening or couldn't, there was no place near them doing an early screening, to them that really is, it's collateral damage, and they just, they just look at it as part of it's part of the fog of war. It's exactly what it is in war. It's when you do things that you don't mean to do and innocent people get hurt who weren't the targets, and you're supposed to try to minimize that as much as possible. They don't care about minimizing it. They just don't care about it at all. And it's just to see this court time and time again side with them and say, no, that's okay with us. And, it's amazing. They'll say things like, well, this, we're overruling the lower courts because we don't believe this is a proper decision for the courts. We see this all the time, right,
Yep.
Danielle?
Yep.
And yet, when they want to step in to let Donald Trump do whatever the fuck he wants,
Yep.
they have no problem stepping in then. So it's more of this, it's this phony originalist bullshit where they find, they pretend to find things that back up their views by looking back at the framers of the Constitution, etc. But they pick and choose, and it's a scam, and it's such an obvious scam at this point that they are just picking and choosing, and it's the same thing they're doing here, and it's grotesque.
And I'm just like, you know what? Since they don't give a fuck about the rule of law, I don't think anybody else should either. I think that the rulings from the Supreme Court should be taken now with a grain of salt, which is what we are seeing happening in some lower courts pushing back against the Supreme Court and saying, no, my ruling still stands. And that is with one of the rulings that just happened this week with regard to deportations. And so the Supreme Court in many ways are making themselves wholly illegitimate, right?
Yeah.
And that's what happens in fascist regimes, right? Like you just keep going along. So it's just like, you know what? We actually don't give a fuck. How about that? And my other thing, too, is that none of these people should allow to feel comfortable in their lives. I don't want Justice John Roberts. I don't want Kavanaugh, any of these people being able to peacefully enjoy a meal. People should be protesting them every single fucking way that they go. They should be protested everywhere that they go, because the decisions that they're making are fucking disgusting, they are odious, and they are grotesque.
Yeah, and I guess the last thing I'll say is, you noted that some of the lower courts are like taking note of this and saying no. It is kind of interesting that the lower courts have been fairly consistent in ruling against Trump and things like that. And we're not talking lower courts that are completely filled with liberal justices or justices that were appointed by Democratic presidents. We're talking about courts that have judges, rather, who were appointed sometimes by Obama or whatever, but often by Bush, sometimes even by Trump, ruling against him. But it seems like as soon as it gets to the Supreme Court, they cannot wait to overturn these lower court decisions. And it's just showing that this isn't even really that much. Well, it's partially about ideology. It's not wholly about ideology, because you have ideologically conservative judges on the Court of Appeals, in the district courts, who are consistently ruling against Trump, as I said. And yet when it gets to the Thomases and the Roberts and the Kavanaughs and the Gorsuches and the Alitos, somehow they managed to find a way to help out Donald Trump, to help out conservatives in general. And so you're right. It's getting harder and harder every day to think of them as legitimate.
Because they're not.